You're listening to The Hurt Locker, the podcast that opens a door on men's mental health. Producer Tim here. As a short note, this is just a recording to capture all of the listener questions that we couldn't fit into the original recording with James Brown on ADHD and mental health. Thank you for your responses and your support. I hope you enjoy listening along.
Oh, we've got a listener's question time. Okay, come on, Tim. Yes, Tim did tell me about a question. Sorry, lads, sorry. I could have rambled on. I'm just conscious of the time.
Okay, thanks, Yinka, and special thanks to James. So the responses we've had from you, our listeners, have been fantastic. And James, we've got quite a mixed bunch of questions for you. So really quickly, here's our first one from Pete. So Pete explains that he's 36 years of age and he has recently received his ADHD diagnosis in August last year. Pete also kindly shares that he struggled with work, study and relationships looking back, and as a result he feels like he's so far behind others and he's running out of time. He also feels that he's wasted a lot of time and it's a constant battle for him in his mind. So he would like to ask your advice for dealing with these thoughts. I'm happy to share he states that he's recently been taking meds and his mood and motivations have both improved, which is brilliant. So James, any thoughts on Pete's question?
Firstly, again, thank you, Pete, for sharing that, because every person that speaks up and shares their lived experiences, other people will feel seen and will realise they're not alone and they're not isolated. And what Pete's described, not to diminish it, is fairly typical, is that when we get to that point of diagnosis, we grieve for the past, we are often struggling in the present, and we worry about the future. Now, because ADHD is unique and we all have our own different presentations and issues, what I would say is that it can get better. When I got diagnosed, I didn't see a future for myself. I genuinely didn't see a future. And as dark as things have been and as bad as my mental health is, I can see a future now. And part of that is because I have a support system in place. Now, I'm not aware if Pete has that support system, whether he has a partner or trusted friends. If I didn't have that support system, then I probably wouldn't be here. And if Pete needs to find other people that have interests, then what I'd say is if there's a local ADHD support group, or our charity has a Discord server with 7,000 people on it, there are places where you can find people where they know that you don't even have to explain how you're feeling, because we know. When an ADHD meets an ADHD, and again, whilst we do have different experiences and we start to open up about these things, you just find that people will nod and say, yeah, me too. And that doesn't solve things, but it does help you start to accept yourself. And Pete, what I would say is you're the cake and not the ingredients. And you might sometimes focus on the struggles. You might sometimes focus on the things that are difficult. And it's easy to do that if we sometimes have a negative internal bias with ADHD. But you're a wonderful, magical creation, living on a speck of a planet in a huge universe. And things will get to a point where you can look back at these struggles and realize that you got through them. Sometimes it takes time, and part of this is emotionally accepting your ADHD, getting to the point where when things happen because of ADHD, you self-chastise a bit less, your language becomes a bit softer, and you start to accept that you're always going to do some of these things, and that doesn't mean that times won't be challenging. So if you've got a support network, that's great. If not, there are people, there are groups out there that can help you feel part of something, Pete.
Excellent. Thank you for that, James. Next question, Tim.
Question number 2 is from Dominique, and she asks, how can we increase both the awareness and acceptance of ADHD within Black communities?
It's a really good question. There are, if you look at various different communities in the UK, there are different levels of social acceptance of A, mental health, and B, neurodivergence. And it's probably most accepted, I would say, in the kind of white English community, but it's still not very accepted. In some communities, and I know South Asian people, I know African Caribbean people, I know people from East Asia who have not disclosed their ADHD to their family, or have, and have immediately been told never speak of this again.
Absolutely.
From each of those communities. I know, students. I had to take. I didn't have to. I took one of my personal tutees at university to an eating disorder clinic because they couldn't tell their parents they had an eating disorder, and they clearly needed help. So I said, well, I'll take you to the clinic. We'll get all of your letters sent to me, and I'll pass them on to you because then you can get help. And that was just, for me, just being supportive. But within some communities, the level of acceptance is different. And if you then add to that the complexity of, particularly for men in some communities, and again, the vulnerability piece, that is showing that you're vulnerable, that you're not masculine, in the typical social normative way that you are what other people might see as being weak. In some communities, in some spaces, that is enough to stop people from disclosing or looking for help. So what we need to do is it really isn't for me as a white person to tell other communities what they need to do, but there needs to be a better conversation between educational systems, between the various elements of the criminal justice system, between the government, the Department for Health, with community leaders, to try and understand why in some communities there is resistance to mental health issues or neurodivergence, to try and explain and to normalize the fact that this is happening. There are people that have got neurodivergences or mental health issues in every community, and to try and educate, but to do it, on terms of the community. And this is part of the problem. Part of the problem we often get when it comes to policy is policymakers only have one language, and that's, I'm a politician, I speak politically. And that, it isn't going to resonate with people from the various different kind of non-white, non-heteronormative demographics we've got, who've been left behind in almost every aspect of life, whether it's socioeconomic, educational, healthcare, outcomes worse almost across the board for those different demographics. A lack of trust in policymakers because of what's happened in the past.
100%.
But there's no effort to actually say, okay, well, this is important. Maybe we need to approach this a little bit differently, beyond having a minister that might not be white and then using that as a flag of honor, saying, yes, but we have a South Asian prime minister, or we have a black chancellor, as if that's showing you that they actually care about the different demographic groups in our society, when it's just it's like a badge they can stick on the website to say, we're not just bothered about the white people and the straight people, we're worried about everybody else as well, when in reality, well, show us.
Yeah. Deeds, not words.
Exactly that.
Great. Number 3 has come in from Aidan. Aidan Squiffy is his handle. He's put, and I don't know if you know this person, James, he's put, does James feel that the best thing for his mental health is to start yet another project that will take away more time and energy than he may be admitting to himself? Asking for someone who should have been asleep several hours ago. Over to you, James.
Yeah, absolutely. And in fact, that's exactly what I've done by joining the NHS England ADHD task force at a time when I'd said I'm going to step back from responsibilities because I need to actually have some rest and recuperation. And then as soon as the opportunity came up, yep, I can commit 12 hours a month to doing that on top of everything else. I mean, Yinka will probably know more about this or be able to speak to this about me. Again, that the identity of being a fixer, the drive to change things, the drive for me to be one of the last generations that have to go through the things I went through, so that generations that follow me don't, in me is huge. This is the bridge I will die on. This is the battle cry that I will, to my last breath utter, that I will start up big projects at my expense happily, because if it helps other people, if it lessens other people's struggling and suffering, then it is worth it.
Yeah. There's nothing to add to that. I concur.
Next question, and it's a big one. It's shout out to Sam, friend of the podcast, big supporter of the podcast, does amazing work, and thank you. But this is a big question, James. So, okay, how can we prepare our neurodiverse young people to enter the world of further education, living away from home and work? On the flip side to that, what needs to improve to enable these young neurodiverse people to thrive?
Yeah, thank you. We call that a hospital pass in the podcasting game. What I would say is actually that the upstream of that, or earlier than that, is where things need to change to help us develop the social skills and the communication skills and the independence that young people with ADHD will need when they leave home, when they start to access less structured education. There are so many problems with this, but we don't teach our children properly. If you look at Scandinavian models where play and socialization are the most important things until you're 7, 8 or 9 years old, and there's no standardized testing, and you look at their educational attainment and it's huge. Now, sadly, we follow the American model of just test. Yeah. And one of the worst things that ever happened for the neurodivergent community is the national curriculum. It's saying you've got to study these subjects whether you find them rewarding or not. And that means there are lots of young people who disengage from education, who struggle to learn how to profess their knowledge and understanding of subjects, because things like exams don't test knowledge and understanding, they test recall. And because there is a neurodevelopmental delay in ADHD, so we're normally kind of somewhere between 2 and 5 years behind in terms of our emotional intelligence, in terms of our personality, in terms of our identity. When many people go into further education or higher education, they are going in there at a slightly emotionally immature state or stage of their life. And we're not preparing them for that. So what we really need is a more systematic approach to supporting young people who are neurodivergent to have the life skills that they need, and not just the academic skills. On an individual basis, if you care for, live with, love somebody who's young and then making that change, again, it's about making sure that they have as much support in place. And this is going to sound like a really simple and silly thing. Be there for questions. One of the big issues, and I know Tim will be aware of this, is with ADHD is what we call rejection sensitivity. It's, we almost all have it. And it often means we don't ask questions because we're afraid that we'll look stupid. And this is people my age as well. I coach people who say, yeah, I'm working on a project. It's 2 weeks overdue, but I forgot to write down a little bit in the meeting and I can't ask for that information because they'll think I'm stupid. So be there for that person to ask questions. How do I do this? I've got to learn how to cook for myself. I've got to learn how to budget. Be there for those questions and let that person know that you want those questions, because then they can learn from you and they can develop the life skills that are going to help them get through any later educational experience.
It's interesting you mentioned that, because being there means societal shift. That's what I feel, because there's a tendency for us to just be in our own lanes, as it were, and not to be embracing others who were struggling, etc., to allow them to move on. And I always see this as a bit of the body politic. We stub our toe or our finger. It affects all of us. It affects all of us. So something that happens in Gaza, it may be thousands of miles away, but it's impacting me in some way, shape or form. And if I tend to not look at it, then I'm doing a disservice to me. And it's the same thing. And maybe God's is an extreme and all that, but I think there's that notion of we've just got to change the narrative on how we support each other. Really, really do. And it's not always a case of, I'm all right, Jack.
No.
Yeah.
Go on, Tim.
No, I just wanted to share something because it chimes in with what Sam's question was, your response, James, and also what Yinka said about supporting people. I went for an interview earlier today, knowing that this podcast was going to be in the evening. But it was an interview. I'm not going to share the ins and outs of the institution and everything, but it was for a student engagement, student support role. And this is the first time at age 39 I've gone to an interview within higher education, having held quite a few jobs in that sector. And I said, I've got ADHD, my name's Tim, please can I have the interview questions ahead of my interview? Had to wait 2 weeks and I got a positive response. I thought, this is great. And I prepared all my answers as best I can. I get there, obviously a little bit kind of nervous, in front of 5 people on a panel. And then one of the ladies, the recruitment manager, says, okay, we've got, 9 questions. You've got 2 minutes to answer each one. And you've got half an hour, which will include your questions at the end. And all I'm going to say is, when I was preparing for the questions, it would be good to know that I only had 2 minutes, to answer them. It's not enough time. It's just not enough time for anyone, in my opinion. But yeah, little things like that were left out, and it was obviously a surprise when you didn't need one, when you thought you prepared. And, and straight away, if you think about it, it wasn't surprised. The interview overran by 5-10 minutes because it just isn't enough time, to be concise and give technical answers. Even if you have prepared, sometimes that tick box, sometimes that support is there, you can ask for it, but it's all about implementing it and making sure that it's effective for that person to use that in terms of equality within education. So that's just something I wanted to share from today. So then that last question we have, I think for now, James, barring Yinka, might have some follow-ups, is the last time I interviewed you was about 2 years ago, and we were talking about higher education ADHD, and I wanted an answer to my question where we left off. Did you manage to get your Tigger onesie in the end?
No, oh my God, no, but so there's a backstory to this, Yinka. I gave a talk in Southampton or Plymouth, I can't remember, and in the Q&A somebody asked a question saying about masking, saying I wanted to come wearing a Tigger onesie tonight, but I was scared because people would think I was weird. When can I go out wearing a Tigger onesie? And I actually started crying on stage because I thought, why shouldn't you be able to go anywhere wearing a Tigger onesie? And that is a beautiful way of describing society's view of anything that's different, of difference, is that there's immediate skepticism, there's immediate kind of abuse. I didn't get a Tigger onesie, Tim, but when I did a talk in Brighton 2 months ago, 2 people came wearing Tigger onesies because they'd been to one of my talks before, and I was just bowing down at them.
We are not worthy.
Yeah, you've won life as far as I'm concerned by doing that.
Thank you so much, James, for answering those questions. Amazing. I'll pass over to Yinka now to finish.
It's been brilliant. Just a final question. Have you watched Patience?
No, I don't think I have.
On Channel 4.
I've not.
She's out. She works in the Home Office criminal record. She's neurodivergent. And
Is she? I need to make a note.
And they co-opt her onto solving crimes. And I binge watched it last week. 8 episodes, and I loved it. I loved the mannerisms, everything.
When you see popular culture portray neurodivergence right, and they get it right, it's wonderful to see.
Beautiful to see.
It is, and this is why I'm really, I don't like the word proud, but being involved in the BBC and one of their flagship programs where one character has ADHD and another one will soon have ADHD. What I like about that is that they're trying to do that. They're saying, we want to get this right, and let's ask people, is this the behavior you would expect to see? What would happen in this situation? And it's really important because when you see people out there who, in a way, are representing you, you want them to represent you in a way that's appropriate. And I think that I'm going to definitely look for that program because I think it sounds good.
Tim's asked us the question. Tell us about your tattoo.
I mean, which one?
Oh, interesting.
I mean, take your pick. I've got 21 tattoos.
The Bowie one.
The Bowie. Oh, so yeah, there's 2 David Bowie ones. There's one on my leg, and unfortunately, it looks like David Beckham, not David Bowie. So I don't get that very much.
Please. Don't broadcast that one. Around David.
I've got one on my arm, which is a David Bowie. I'm kind of obsessed with David Bowie. I think someone who grew up feeling alien-esque, not feeling the same as everybody. He was, to me, the only person that I knew that was different. And I've got a lyric on my arm.
Which one?
Golden Years, which says, "Never look back, walk tall, act fine." And it's about masking. For me, it's not an instruction, but it describes most of my life in a way. The particularly walk, tall, act, fine. And I think to come from somebody who I felt so much love for and so much connection with, to have that as part of my body, it was kind of a no-brainer.
I'm going to share this with you. My very first single I ever bought with my own money was Ashes to Ashes.
Oh, what a song. What a song.
You know,
incredible song. Incredible. He stole
the first song.
Yeah, he stole the drum beat off Madness. But other than that, it's just an amazing song. And the people in the video, Steve Strange, people who were kind of, under the radar in that scene. Yeah, exactly.
Yes.
It was incredible. And, whether this makes it in the podcast or not, what a way to control your destiny. To 100%. Make that final album as a piece of art, and it just, for me, everything about that man is a lesson in how people should approach things. There's a quote that he uses, and I'm going to misquote this, about where the interesting place to be is when you're stood in the water, but it's just a little bit too deep for you to have your head above water, and that's where interesting things happen. And I love that idea that pushing yourself outside of your comfort zone is where you can find some really interesting things.
And it doesn't Brené Brown talk about that is the crossroads, as it were, to creativity and change, when you're out of your comfort zone.
Yeah. And again, and her work, again, on vulnerability, it's something that everybody should see, because these are subjects that, unless you actually watch TED Talks or read specific books, you just don't know these things exist. But yeah, for me, he was a hero. And I think I've just got 2 tattoos of his. I'm not sure. There's probably more.
I hope you enjoyed listening to that. Thanks again to James Brown. Thank you, Yinka. Please do check out the episode 38 with James. He's talking about his ADHD, his comorbidities and his mental health. And please do check out the links within the episode that we mention in reference to charities, books, links, websites, podcasts, all things that you can get more information on ADHD. Thank you for listening. Stay tuned and take care.
The Hurt Locker is a safe space for our guests to openly share their mental health experiences. If you have been affected by any of the content in this recording, then please reach out for support. If it is an emergency, dial 999. If you would like to talk to somebody today, then please call the Samaritans on 116 123. Stay safe. Thanks for listening to this episode of The Hurt Locker. Please give us a rating or share with another listener. You can also follow us on Instagram and Facebook at The Hurt Locker Pod.